everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grew Up. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome my guest, Justine Chan. Hey, Justine, how are ya?
Hi, Blair. How are you?
I'm great. It's literally been like 15
I
years
don't
or
even
something.
know how long. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
And then I was thinking about how we know each other. I guess your cousin.
Yeah, my cousin, and I feel like we had friends in the same friend circle. And yeah, I feel like we just ran into each other every now and then.
Sure. Yeah. So Justine and I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, but now she is in California. I'm sure she's killing it out there. Um, but I'm excited to hear about what you do, Justine, because right before this started recording, I was like, oh, actually, I don't know what you do, but she's in the fashion industry, which I know, and I'm excited because I think you're kind of. I've had a footwear designer on, but I think
Okay.
it's a kind of a different type of industry altogether in that situation. So I'm excited to hear your side of the story and what it is that you do. So without me talking anymore, Justine,
Yes.
what is it that you do?
Okay, so my title is Director of Merchandising, but in short, I'm a merchandiser at a corporate company.
What company?
So
Can you
I'm
say
at
that?
Legends. They're a men's activewear brand, and we're kind of new, so we're still a little young and growing as we speak. So definitely a smaller sized business, but yeah, it's
Okay,
been really
so
exciting.
so it's menswear, you said?
Hmm. Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Um, okay, so a merchandiser, I mean, I can imagine what that is, but I think you should kind of tell me. So, and pretend I know nothing, pretend I know
Okay.
zero things.
Yeah, so basically a merchandiser, I mean, a merchandiser could be actually quite a few different things, but generally speaking, a merchandiser is someone within an organization who essentially helps build out what the assortment looks like for the business. So obviously you're building an assortment at the price point for your target consumer. It's on brand for that business. And is also obviously going to drive dollars, right? Because it's a business and we all want to make money. But yeah, so basically I'm in charge of all of that and managing that with a lot of different teams. I get to work with designers, production, product development, CRM, marketing, creative marketing, brand marketing teams. And I could go on. There's so many more roles that I kind of have touch points with, but that's sort of kind of why I really like merchandising because I feel like, I like working with a lot of different types of people, a lot of different types of businesses too. So like I'm creative, but I also like numbers. So I get to work with all those people, which is really nice. And that's actually what makes it the most enjoyable for me.
Oh man. Okay. So you do have to know the fashion side, I'm assuming. And so, but you said you do like the numbers part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So as a merchandiser, is that kind of a big deal too? Like if you don't like the numbers, are you going to have a hard time?
Yeah, I think, I would say one of the assumptions people have about merchandisers or buyers, you hear a lot of people as a buyer. So I was a buyer at one point and then I changed into merchandising. They're very similar, but I think the misconception that people have is that it's, just all glitz and glam. It's like devil wears Prada and like just all this fabulous fashion and apparel and accessories. But I think what people don't realize, even fashion merchandising majors, is there's a lot of data that goes behind being a good merchandiser. So, while I do work really cross-functionally with a lot of creative teams like design and marketing, I actually do work with finance and planning as well. And planners are essentially like they're taking the budget from the finance team and then they're sort of like working with me to look at, okay, well, what sold really well? What trends are we seeing out there from a data standpoint? And how can I align that with trends that I'm seeing out there from like a fashion aesthetic standpoint? And what makes the most sense for our business. So I help to sort of collect all of that data and that analysis. And some of it's just gut feeling too. I would say that's probably like the hardest part to like really like nail on the head is like you have to go with your gut on a lot of these things. But I take all of that information and that data, and then that's what helps to then drive what that assortment might look like for the company.
Oh, so interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
but
like I spend a lot of time in Excel.
oh, that's horrible for me. Um, no, because okay, I don't know if you remember, but my mom owned a bridal wear store in Marietta.
Okay,
It's
I
called
think I remember
Dream
that.
Bridal
Yeah.
in Formal Wear. It's like in the Park Air Shopping Center off
Yes,
Johnson's
I
Ferry.
remember that.
Okay, so like, she was in design like even now still, but like all of her, adult life and
Hmm.
um I think for me, like I felt this need to follow in her footsteps because it's just like what I watched growing up and like I worked at the store and all this stuff. But like I didn't love it as much as she did, but then I was like, oh, maybe I'll be, fashion merchandising seems something like
Oh,
I
so you
could
thought about
do.
it.
Yeah, I did think about it, but I knew nothing. I just, I just bought some like I would pick out dresses for my mom's shop and I would tell her, "Get this. Is that the same thing?" I didn't think so, but my mom was like, "It's kind of the right idea." And I'm like, "No, I don't think there's a lot more to it." But even just hearing you, I'm like, "No, I could not do that."
Yeah, there's a lot underneath the covers that I feel like aren't really talked about because it's not as glamorous, right? Like
Right, because
it's
but
definitely not.
you think that because of and I would even say, Justine, even more today, like
Hmm.
through social media and stuff, you're like, "Oh, I can do that." Like
Yeah.
like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Everything, yeah. You get this they're like a facade, so you have this idea of like what something might be, but you're not seeing the full picture. And
Right,
I
right.
feel like that's what I felt like when I was in school studying
Mm,
fashion merchandising is, I had this idea of what fashion merchandising was going to be like, and then I got into industry and it was I mean, not totally different, but there was a lot that I wish I had known before going into it for sure.
oh man. Like
Yeah.
what?
I mean, honestly, like I knew data was going to be part of my day to day because it's like analyzing sales reports, and trends, hindsighting so that you can then make, either better decisions or different decisions going forward. So I always knew that there was like a math side of it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize how much of it I was going to have to know, and
Oh,
how heavy of my time was going to be spent on that side of the business. I would say like currently I spend a little bit less time in Excel, but like my last job, I mean, if Excel crashed on me, I would like cry. I
oh
wouldn't be
my
able to do
gosh.
my
Okay,
job.
so okay. Just help me paint a bit better picture for
Hmm.
myself. Okay, so like you're saying that as a fashion merchandiser,
Hmm.
you collect this data so that you can make better purchases for the company,
Hmm.
right? But like you can tell this just by the trending of what people buy, or what else is taken into a calculation.
Yeah,
Do you
I
get what
mean,
I'm
there's
asking?
a
Sorry.
lot of things. No, 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 it makes sense. So there's a lot of things, a lot of different factors that play into it. So okay, so one example I think is probably like the easiest to understand is like seasonality, right?
Okay.
So like I can
Hmm.
look at data to basically tell me like, oh, okay, pants are, let's say 30% of the business during October through December, so Q4, let's say, and then maybe into the next year, Q1 to like Q2, like you might start to then see like a dip in pants sales penetration, but you might see shorts and tank tops pick up. So it's like, looking at that data year to
Mm.
year is really helpful, or month to month, just so I can really see what those trends are like, so that if I bought too much, let's say, and I have an excess inventory in pants one season, I know how I should buy it for that next year.
I see.
Or so that's like the easiest thing to digest. But there could be other factors coming into play, like maybe we tried a new trend, and I'm looking at sales and it's just completely tanking, and I don't know why. So I have to look into the why. Is it getting
Mm.
enough love in marketing? Did we post anything on social media? Is it being run in any ads, or did we send an email about it? What kind of email did we send about it? What kind of assets did we shoot? Did we shoot it on models, or is it just, our ecom imagery on site? So there are a lot of like things that you kind of have to think through. And that's where I think the creativity part of data analysis is really interesting to me. because it could be like anything driving it. And you kind of just have to like, again, trust your gut, look at the data and be able to piece together like the why so that you can inform your next year's decision, next quarter's decision, whatever it is.
That is so cool.
It's a lot, sorry.
No, it's not a lot. That was great. I totally get a better picture now. But man, that is a lot to think about and
Mhm.
things I don't think about when I buy my clothes.
You aren't, but someone is. Someone
For
in that
sure,
company
for
is.
sure. Oh my goodness. Like, okay, you mentioned earlier there's a difference between a buyer and a merchandiser. I can't remember. Did you say what the difference was?
I didn't.
Okay.
So the main difference between a buyer and a merchandiser, and this can totally vary between like company to company, which makes it even more confusing.
Okay.
But the main difference between a buyer and a merchandiser is a buyer typically buys off of a line. So
Ah,
it's something they're not necessarily developing and working with the designers to create anything per se. I think they can have some sort of say in it, depending on the company, their situation, or what have you. But for the most part, they're the ones that are sort of looking at the full assortment and saying like, okay, based off of what I know, what my needs are for the business for this time of year, for our customer at our price point, here are the things that I want to buy. And here's how much I want to buy of it. And again,
mm,
using some of that data and then that gut feeling that you have, you kind of are able to sort of predict, like, I think this is going to be a top seller, so I'm going to buy more of this one. This is an A buy, or you know what, this is a trend, probably too trendy for a customer. Let's buy this as tight as we can, but we still want to have it represented in the line. So that's typically what more of like what a buyer does. So they're buying,
mhm, mhm.
and a merchandiser, again, depending on the company and the situation, a merchandiser is more so building that assortment. And they're usually the ones that work a little bit more closely with design teams because they're basically saying like, hey, you know what, that's based off of what we saw last year, based off our budget, how much money we have to spend. We think that the assortment needs to look like this. This is how many
Mm.
SKUs or like number of styles and colors that we think that we should have. Here are the trends that we think that should be represented. And then design will then take sort of all of that and then go and design into like that, what we call like an assortment plan or a SKU plan. So they kind of get to work more on the development and the design side
Mhm.
of it. And in some companies, the merchandiser builds that assortment and then presents to buyers, and the buyers for their respective businesses will then take from that line and buy what they see fit for their business.
Wow. Okay. Okay, I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
The difference between like the kind of the creative side of it and then just
Mm-hmm.
buying the product itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you mentioned like trends a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
something came to mind, a question. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but I just
No,
have a
go
lot of
for it.
questions. But the question that came to mind for me was like, oh, like okay, so how does one predict the next season's trends? Like as far as like style goes. Like for example, like my husband and I were at the Avalon in Alpharetta just the
Mhm.
other day and I was looking at the windows and they're all kind of similar, like
Yeah.
it is every season. Like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I see. Like we're kind of in this like peasant dress kind of feel, like bohemian kind of, we're back to that, right? Which
Yes.
is like, and so, which is, it always, my mom always taught me things come full circle. Don't throw things
Yep.
away.
She's not
Right?
wrong. She is not wrong.
But like, how does one, like, is it like Fashion Week that predicts that, or what happens?
Yeah, so there's a lot that you can look at. I think depending on like the your business, the company that you're at, you may look at different things to sort of help forecast and like read those
Uh-huh.
trends. But so like Fashion Week is obviously one of those things. Those are definitely the furthest out trends.
I
So like
see.
those are like that's like definitely a lot more avant-garde. It's more high end,
Hmm, hmm.
but there are ways that you can take those ideas and trends and apply them in and make it sort of for your everyday customer
I
and like more
see.
for your business. So you can certainly look at fashion weeks. If your business is maybe a little bit slower, that might be a little too like trendy or too fast for them, too soon for them to pick up on. So you might look at WGSN is a good report site online, and they have anything and everything you could possibly imagine on like consumer reports. So whether it be
Oh,
fashion, business, they have like so related to fashion specifically, they have like color trend reports,
really?
style trend reports that you can look at, and they even break it out by season and year. And they can go as far out as like 2 years or even more, depending on like what you're looking at. But so yeah, those are two like very useful tools and places that you can go to look at trends. The other place too, honestly, especially at this day and age, is social media. Like I hate to say it,
Mm.
but because everyone's constantly on social media, it's like instant gratification, and it's like cool to be very unique and different, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like you
mm-hmm.
used to want to be like everyone else, but I feel like now
Yes.
the trend is to like be your own person. And
Yes.
so I feel like a lot of trends are also sort of coming to be with all of these, creators, content creators, fashion bloggers, influencers or whatever that just have their own cool sense of style. And yeah, there's a lot that you can find online too. So it's just like, you can generally pick up on trends if you see the masses starting to follow them.
Yes, yes.
Um, but yeah, there are definitely places that you can go to that can like more so definitively tell you like, oh, this is the color of the year.
Oh
Let's
man.
put that color in the line.
But like you guys have to kind of get ahead of that though, right?
Yeah, so we work typically like from the very, very beginning of the process, like before we even start to design or sketch anything,
Mm-hmm.
we could be anywhere from like a year and a half out to 2 years out, just conceptualizing. So again, looking at those trend reports, because again, they're looking really far out too, so it's not too late. Like you have enough time to actually put these ideas into work and then produce them in time to be on trend. Um, so yeah,
That
anywhere a
sounds
year
like
to two
fun. That
years
sounds
out.
like a fun part of the job.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you then, like a work day?
Oh gosh, that's loaded.
Uh,
There is no typical like work day. I would say, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people say that, but there really isn't.
mm,
I feel like it really changes. I would say even in my current role, it's probably even less like standard.
mm-hmm.
But typically as a merchandiser, I would say your week would look like your Monday or your Tuesday is really heads down focused on reporting. So you're either pulling reporting, analyzing the data, and like sort of gathering all of that information for either a selling report, a selling meeting, so that you can sort of recap and share what you're seeing in the data,
Mm-hmm.
just outwardly to like your design team, marketing, whoever. Again, that depends on the company who ends up participating in those meetings. But it's really just to stay on top of like, okay, what's selling, what's not selling? Is there anything we need to do to help drive sales? So on and so forth. So I would say in most companies, that's like your Monday or your Tuesday is usually very report heavy. And then sort of throughout the week is when you have a lot more of like your meetings. So I feel like a lot of my meetings currently are like sitting in fits. So when we get a proto sample in, maybe it's the first time we're seeing this in person. So all I saw was a little CAD, a little illustration of what this looks like. And I would say when I was younger, I had a really hard time. Like this looks like it's a sweater for cartoons. Like I don't know how to visualize this into like an actual garment.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But now being in the industry for quite some time, like, and I can now see that
Oh, interesting.
from the
Okay.
little cartoon image, the CAD. But yeah, so I'll sit on fits, and there'll be comments like, oh, this zipper isn't working, or the construction of this isn't working. The design teams will sort of have their conversations, and I'm really just there to make sure that like I'm staying on top of like what changes are being made. Does that impact the cost? Because I need to make sure we're hitting margins. If we're not hitting the margins, then I need to speak up and sort of say like, okay, well, what other options are there? So some days are like that where I can sit on more fun meetings. Other days are just business hindsighting, or I don't know, high level strategy meetings where we're really just like talking through, what's coming down the pipeline, anything we need to change in the process. Because I actually manage and own our calendar for the product side.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's as high level as that, and then other times just touch bases to make sure that like we're all just communicating with each other and
Yeah.
aware of like any changes that are happening So yeah, a lot of meetings, and then it's a lot of just like being heads down and like focusing on like the day-to-day tasks that just need to happen.
So I really like how you're articulating your job because I think you're right. Like at the, when we first started talking, you're kind of mentioning how, yeah, I think people really glamorize the industry. I'm like,
Mhm.
man, this is hard work. Like what you're doing, like just so that people can look good. Like Um, but Justin, can you take me back to like our high school days? Like,
Yeah.
did you always want to do this or what? Yeah, what was your thought
No.
process?
So I had no idea this was a thing. So you probably knew before I did that fresh fashion merchandising was a thing. The only reason why I even knew it existed was because my cousin Christine, because she majored in fashion merchandising at UGA. So that was like the only reason why I even knew about this industry, or not this part of the industry, I guess. And but when I was in high school, I didn't really think that that's what I wanted to do. I kind of always assumed, kind of like you actually, like my family, they run and own restaurants, and I just kind of assumed that I would take them over
Mm,
someday and like work with them or whatever. So in high school, I always knew I'm gonna apply to business school. I don't know where, but like I'm gonna go to business school. So that was literally the plan up until I had to actually apply for schools, because I had to really think about like, okay, well, what schools have good business schools?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget this, because I always thought that that's what my parents wanted too. They never really seemed to like, not that they didn't care, but they never seemed to object
Uh-huh,
until
uh-huh.
I applied for colleges. And I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but they basically sat me down. They're like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to go to business. And they're like, is that what you really want to do? And I was like, well, I just kind of figure I would take, help work in the restaurant business, after graduating. Um, but then, they like really made me think about like, okay, well, what does that mean? That means 7 days a week of work. Like there's
Mm,
no day off of restaurants, right? It also means not a 9 to 5 job. So you are going to have to get up, go to work early, work the lunch shift, work the dinner shift, work closing shift, and then and only then are you actually done. So they made me think about my childhood growing up, because my parents actually weren't around a lot growing
oh
up.
man, this is so interesting.
So yeah, like you don't. I mean, I knew that it would be really challenging. I think, especially
Mm,
like with a family, but I never really thought about it until he said that, and I was like, that really put it into perspective. I was like, okay, you know what? Like the one thing I wished I could change about my childhood was actually having my parents around more, because like
mm,
I just didn't have the same like upbringing that a lot of my friends had growing up.
mm-hmm,
They got
mm-hmm.
to go to parties, their parents knew their friends' parents, and like I didn't have that because the parents were always working.
Right, right.
Um, and so, it really made me think about it. And I was like, okay, you know what? That's a good point. Like, no, I don't know if I want that for the rest of my life. So they just asked me, they're like, well, what else do you want to do? Or like, what do you like? And I really like fashion at
Mm,
that time of my life. And I knew Christine was a fashion merchandising major at UGA. So I kind of talked to her about it. And I was like, you know what? It's business fashion. At least that's what I think it is. So, all else fails, I can always apply the same knowledge, but to a different business. But I know I like clothes and I know I like business. So let's just do that.
oh
That's how I
yeah.
picked.
Yeah. Oh man. So you ended up going to UGA, right?
Yep, I went to TJ.
And so when you're there, are there like when you're studying the major, do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like it prepared you for work
Um,
life?
yes and no. I would say mostly no. Which sounds terrible. Like all my professors
No,
were
but I
like great.
mean, I think most of us are on the same camp, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah. I think it prepared me enough to the point where I was like, oh, okay, like I really like the things that I'm like studying,
hmm.
or like I'm really interested in it. So yay, that worked out. But I think what it didn't help with was just understanding and grasping the concept of like what it really meant to be a merchandiser,
Uh-huh.
all the different types of merchandising that I could go into, like what that actually looks like. Our the major itself at UGA, at least when I was there, was fairly small. It was actually bigger than when Christine was there.
Hmm.
And it's even bigger now from what I
Hmm.
hear. So I just think for it being a small major, like you learn all the things that you need to know. But I think internships were the more helpful piece of school, and just getting to talk with people who were alumni that were already in the industry, whether it was fashion or not, but just like people who were already working, and being able to talk with them. That was what I think that was the most impactful and the most helpful part of school,
Yeah, yeah. I
actually.
mean, I think yeah, like I mentioned before, you're not alone in this camp because
Mm-hmm.
I think even, my husband talks all the time, like if I had just like like remembered, like, because you just take the test. Like you just take
Yes,
the test, you
you can
pass,
get the
get an
pass.
A, and it's like you're done.
Exactly. Yeah.
But um does he feel like school helped? I mean, it did, like you said, right? But
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people I've interviewed too is like mentorship, internship, and like just networking,
Yeah.
right? Has really like you mentioned, impacted the future in their jobs and their careers. But I feel like, my conception of what fashion industry is, like I feel like it would be competitive and a little bit cutthroat. I could be wrong, but
No, you're right.
I'm curious, like how did you get your foot in the door? Because I mean, okay, I did some stalking too. Like I saw like that you worked at Fabletics at one time too, and
Yes.
I'm like, these are not small name businesses, And so I'm
They were when I
curious.
started, though.
I guess. Okay, I do.
Yeah.
Fabletics is a fairly new in comparison to other
Yeah.
athletic wear, but because I remember that Fabletics, I got like a free outfit or something, and it was just to
Uh-huh.
kind of promote the business, and
Yeah.
I ended up liking it a lot. But
Oh,
anyways,
nice.
yeah. So how did you get your foot in the door?
So you already said it earlier, and it's like definitely what I heavily recommend and promote out to like anyone and everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but networking. So
Mm.
I really focus on just like getting to know people in the industry, or people who were, again, like alumni of the fashion merchandising major, and just like talk to them. So that was one of the things that one of my professors did that I really loved, was she actually brought in a panel of alumni,
Mm.
anywhere from like just last year to 5 years or 10 years, just whoever she could get to like come and visit and talk to the students. But hearing each of them talk about their transition into the workforce,
Mm-hmm.
and the industries that they're in, I thought was just very motivating and inspiring to hear firsthand from them, because other than any jobs I would have worked, or my own personal internship experiences, like I really didn't know what else there was out there,
Mm.
and what it might look like, and also just what the opportunities were if I decided not to go into fashion. So it was really nice to see that a lot, I would say half of the panel were actually in the retail industry, and the other half went into, it might be retail, but it was the marketing side, or they just
Oh.
completely went a different route. And so I really loved that a lot, because I got to hear firsthand their experiences. But it was from those experiences when I, got their contacts, that would reach out to them. My first internship at Victoria's Secret was actually through one of the girls on the panel, because she worked at Victoria's Secret, and that was like dream internship for me. So I reached out to her after that panel, and we connected. They didn't even have anything available, like an internship position open,
Uh-huh.
but she still, took my information, brought it to HR. They ended up making a space for me on their team.
Wow.
And it was just through that connection. So that's how I got that internship. My first job out of college was through another person who spoke at a panel. And then, so again, networking. And then my first job was through another person that I knew. Every job that I've gotten to date has been through networking. And so I cannot emphasize enough how important networking is. Even if you don't like I feel like networking, people are like, oh, I gotta go to networking events or like
Yeah,
meet people in
yeah,
industry or whatever. And I'm like, no, actually, I think the most powerful networking that you can do is actually with the relationships that you've already built,
yeah.
that you already have. Because they were also connections that I made through like my parents because they know random people. I don't, from the restaurant or who knows, or they have a friend of a friend. I've also met people through friends. So you just like never know who you're going to come across that might know someone at the
Yeah.
company you want to work at or in the industry who can at least help give you some guidance. And I feel like those relationships that you already have are way more powerful because that's like a reference right there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, networking is like my number one tip and definitely how I got every single one of my jobs.
Oh man, so like I know that to be true, right? And like hearing your story, I'm like, yes, networking is so important. But
Yeah.
do you have any advice for those that right now are listening is like kind of cringing and is like, oh man, I really am so introverted and like like any pointers? I don't know, like just put yourself out there. I don't know.
Hard. So I'm an introvert myself, but I lean like I'm like right in the middle, but I'm definitely introverted, but I lean like
Uh-huh,
a little
uh-huh.
bit more on the extroverted side for an introvert at least. So I totally get it. And yes, it's very cringy to hear. But that's why I put it in the sense of like, don't feel like you have to go out of your way to like
Mm,
attend these like grandiose events or, go to some, I don't know, like you never have to go into anything with the intent of like trying to get a connection. I think it's always just like think about who's already in your circle and, make those connections genuinely because these are people that you already like or hang
yes.
out with or talk to already. So I think it should be a lot easier, I think, especially as an introvert, to be able to then have some of those conversations. It could stem from a simple hangout with your friend and you're just like talking about what your major is or like what you're thinking, what school you're thinking about going to. You might mention, oh, I'm actually thinking about fashion merchandising. Oh, so and so's mom is works for this company, and I just feel like little things like that can go a really long way. And like, you don't have to act on it. You could literally just make a mental note and be like, oh, I'm going to remember that
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
just some time later. Like, let's say if I am looking at internships and they happen to have one open. So, I think it is scary to think about when you hear the word like networking and it's just like, so scary and uh, socially draining,
Yeah.
but I think you can think of it from a different perspective too. Be like, okay, just like think about the people you already know, right? That takes the social anxiety out of it, I would think, and I would hope. And you can just work with what you already have.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great advice, and I'm glad I asked it because even me, I'm like, man, it's like a big ask for some of the young people that I know. It's like, yeah, you got to put
Mm-hmm.
yourself out there, da, 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 da. But then, the way you kind of laid it out, I think makes a lot of sense. And I liked what you said too about like being genuine and like the relationship building, like
Mm-hmm.
not always like thinking you have to go after something, right? But
Yeah.
like be like, hey, yeah, like really build a relationship that has some value and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, later if it happens, like that's you have nothing to lose, really.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's it's like easier, I feel like, to digest like the idea of asking your friend, hey, your mom works at this company, like, does she mind talking to me for 30 minutes or whatever?
Yes.
That's like so much easier than being like, all right, I need to go on LinkedIn and I need to
Right.
find whatever. Cause like, no,
Oh,
I have
stress.
never done that myself
Yeah.
because that sounds terrifying to me. But some people do. And, I think just depending on your personality, whatever you're really comfortable with, just network in whatever way makes the most sense to you. But like definitely network and just, really value and establish those like relationships that you have because I don't believe that you have to necessarily work that hard to find a connection
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. That's good.
mm-hmm.
Um So Justine, going back to kind of like your job,
Mm-hmm.
so how many places have you worked as a merchandiser? Oh.
Okay, so this is my fourth job as a merchandiser.
Okay. Um, I don't know if you feel uncomfortable answering this, just say pass. But like, is there a reason that you've been at different companies?
Yeah, so I have absolutely no problem answering that. So the reason for the move, first and foremost, you're probably going to hear this a lot in any industry, but the
Mm-hmm.
more you move, you're more likely to get a bigger pay raise
Oh,
when you
yes.
move
Okay.
companies. That's not just in fashion. I think that's in other industries as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely true in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the number one reason for me. I actually am not as money driven, I think, as some other people. But for people who are, it's true. You have the ability to get a bigger pay raise when you move around companies. But for me, it was just more about the building my background in the industry, because when I first started in the buying merchandising world, it was in Atlanta. It was at Oshkosh Bagosh,
Oh,
which
my
is, yeah,
favorite.
as everyone grew up wearing the overalls, it was like very familiar to me. So I thought like, oh, this is like full circle. You know, I used to wear these all the time, and now here
Yeah.
I am. But so I was there for 2.5 years, and I knew I was gonna have to go to LA or New York at some point if I really wanted
Mm.
to like dive deep into the fashion industry, or the apparel industry. So that was sort of the main reason that I made that move, was just to give myself some more opportunities and be in a city that had more opportunities,
Yeah, yeah, for
for
sure.
me to just sort of expand my background. My portfolio was just baby clothes at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely didn't want to get like stuck
Stuck
in
in
that
baby
world,
clothes.
even
Yes,
though it was really
yes.
cute, I have to say. um, but yeah, so it was really just to sort of like broaden my portfolio and my background of the different types of apparel that I've been working in. So
Mm-hmm.
when I moved to LA, I actually went into fast fashion, and I was at Forever 21. And so that was like a whole new world for me. I was doing international merchandising in jewelry, which is ironic because I never wear jewelry. This is like as much as I wear
Uh-huh,
now.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
But so my job was to merchandise and basically decide what to buy and how much to buy for over 35 countries in the world.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah.
But
So that
so
was a
cool
whole
when you
new,
say it. You make it sound so
it, it's it's cool until you do, until you do it. It's a lot, but very interesting. I learned a lot there. It was like a totally different side of the business I'd never seen before.
Oh man.
But jewelry again wasn't like my passion. Like out of all the categories I could have done, like it still wasn't like that the one thing that I just felt really passionate about. Which was why it led me to another shift, and that's when I landed at Fabletics. So activewear, active athleisure, whatever you want to
Uh-huh,
call it.
uh-huh.
That's been sort of my focus these past like 7, 8 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you did a long stint there.
Yeah, I was at Fabletics for 6.5 years.
Oh
So,
man.
and
So
I
then
worked
I'm sure
all
that world is
categories.
completely different than just like,
It
mainstream
is,
fashion
because
too.
it introduced me to the subscription model, which is totally different from just having
Right,
a
right.
website, because
Yeah,
like you have
yeah.
to think about the membership. So I learned a lot there because I had to think about the business in a totally different perspective. And so that taught me a lot being there. I also, because I was there for so long, I actually was able to get my hands in every single category, from women's accessories to women's bottoms, bras, tops, jackets. What else did I do? Men's, swim. Like I was able to actually have some sort of involvement in all the categories during my
Mm-hmm.
time there, and that was really cool because that gave me the experience to then take on the job that I'm currently doing now, which is men's. And like you wouldn't think, like I'm a woman, what do I know about men's clothes? But I
Uh-huh.
actually know a little bit more because I was involved in the men's business at Fabletics too.
Oh wow. That's really cool because those type of things set you up for the next stage
Mm-hmm.
in the next chapter. That's neat. Um,
Yeah.
you were saying before we started recording that you wish there were some things that you had known before getting into the industry. And you kind of shared some of it, but if there is like one thing like you wish you could have known before, two things, but like
Okay, I can think of one thing.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So the one thing I wish someone had just better prepared me for, and I think there's nothing that could have better prepared me except for just life experience for this piece. But
Uh-huh.
if there was something that I wish someone would have spoken more about, I guess, while I was still in school, so that I could, I don't know, just make sure that I like read books and really, really focus on this, is how important your people skills are. And I think
Oh.
this goes far beyond just being in the fashion industry, but I think particularly in the fashion industry, it is very cutthroat. You do have a lot of very wild personalities. And there is a full range of different personalities, which is the case in I would say most industries. Anywhere you work, you're gonna run into people that you're gonna mesh well with, you're not gonna mesh well with, personality types that are a little bit more challenging. But I did not realize how important my people skills would sort of come into play when it came to doing my job. Because like the actual job itself is like once you learn it and once you get that mentorship from your manager or whoever it is, and you kind of figure it out, like
Mm-hmm.
that stuff is easy to
Mm-hmm.
me. I think the harder and more challenging piece is like learning how to work with people and different personality types who are not like you. And
Interesting.
yeah, it's like there's like this total psychology behind it. And I love that stuff. Like I actually, by nature, my personality is the type that wants to work with people. So I like to understand people. I'm very intuitive and like empathetic. Like
Uh-huh,
I've just
uh-huh.
always been able to understand people and can read people pretty easily. But even still, like there's just this next level and this layer of like people skills that I feel like it's hard to teach, but definitely needs to be talked more about. Just because I don't know, like school did not prepare me for
Oh man,
the
so
different
like I'm actually
personalities.
kind of surprised because what I remember of our interactions growing up, like you're definitely a people person and
Yeah.
yeah, like social and like everything you just said, intuitive, empathetic, you have those soft skills already, I feel like. But for you to say that you wish you had prepared yourself more speaks volumes. Like,
Oh, I think it's okay. So I guess this is um to clarify.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
I even though I have the people skills, I'm always learning and developing them, of course,
Sure,
as I
yeah.
grow. But even though I'm pretty confident in my people skills, I feel like what is challenging
Mm-hmm.
is approaching those people or those conversations in a way that is not just professional but also genuine and impactful. Like I think
Yes.
that's the piece that is often like people struggle with,
Uh-huh.
is balancing like when do I actually say something, when do I not, how should I say it if I completely disagree, is it worth saying it, because I completely disagree. I feel like a lot of those thoughts tend to go through everyone's mind at some point when
Uh-huh,
they're
uh-huh.
in an uncomfortable situation or maybe working with someone that's a little bit more challenging. And I just feel like I wish I was better prepared to have to deal with those types of conversations because it totally just like caught me off guard. And I mean, I've been able to make them work. And like, for the most part, like, I feel like, I've found my approach to things. But yeah, I can tell you right now that there's a lot of people that I've worked with who do not know how to do that. And it shows because,
Right, right.
it gets really uncomfortable in meetings,
Yeah.
or you end up having, nonsense work drama or whatever it is. And it's just so
Yes.
funny because it's just like, man, I feel like I'm in school again.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I totally feel you. And especially like it's like um I mean, navigating relationships is a hard enough, right? But then doing it
Yep.
in the workplace, I feel like is so much harder. I've
Yeah.
actually never, I can't like speak to that because I don't think I've ever really worked in that kind of environment. But um, yeah, like I mean, I would imagine it could be stressful, especially when you have to get things done. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's
Right.
for the business, but you don't want to hurt people, but then you got to get it done. So sometimes
Yeah.
just saying it is the most efficient and effective. Yes, I totally get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
Man, I'm in ministry. I totally get it.
Oh yeah, you definitely, I'm
Oh
sure.
gosh.
But
Okay,
yeah.
that's a really great piece of advice. I like that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
and like you said, I think it's not just fashion, right? Like
Mm-mm.
across the board, anything you do, I feel like you definitely need those people skills.
In your life, like your personal
Yes.
relationships in your life, like with your kids, like there's relation at the soft skills and just knowing how to work with people, I think is important no matter what you do in your life, because I feel like if you have any sort of relationship with anyone, it's incredibly valuable to sort of have those people skills and you know, just like be confident in them. And I think that's in a work environment, it just gets a little tricky because, you know, this is, let's say it's an issue with your boss. Boss happens to determine the bonus or the raise that you get, or you don't want to lose
Yeah,
your job if,
yeah.
you know, so there's a lot of like hesitancy. And, you know, I would say I was definitely more hesitant starting in the industry, but I've sort of, you know, learned to speak up, learned when not to speak up. You kind of have to pick and choose your battles, and I've definitely, you know, learned or still learning the art of like how to manage up. Those are probably the most challenging. I think it's easier to manage, you know, your direct reports, but managing up, I think, is a little more challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely, you know, there are definitely books out there. So I don't read, but when I read now, it's all leadership, management, like
Yes.
people skill related types of books. Because you know, I don't know, I just want to know and absorb as much as I can, so I
Yeah,
can
for
feel
sure.
pretty good about that.
Man,
Yeah.
maybe you can give me like a list of some of those books after
Oh,
this
I
is
can definitely
over.
give some of them to you. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, Justine, but
Yeah, no worries.
um, I was wondering, okay, like I don't know why this came to mind, but um, like what was like a time where you felt like really stressed on the job? Like,
Oh
don't say every
gosh.
day, okay?
No, there were definitely certain times in my career that I felt really stressed. Am I thinking about a particular like a specific example, like a specific moment, or just in general? Because
Uh,
it can be stressful, I think, for different reasons.
maybe like a specific. Okay. Has there ever been a time when it comes to like um deciding on the merchandising where it's been stressful or something stressful has happened that has affected the way you do your job? I don't know what I'm asking anymore. I think
Affected the way that I do
like
my
okay,
job.
like something that's happened out of your control and then
Okay.
you were responsible for like trying to make it better and it was stressful. I don't know. I
Okay.
just feel like it would be
Okay, I can think of something now. And this
okay.
is probably like the most relatable because these past 2 years obviously have been really challenging.
Right.
Working from home, also just like not really knowing what the heck's gonna happen tomorrow or like next year.
Yes.
So obviously COVID brought on a lot of challenges. Working from home was definitely one of them. I would say my job was less impacted because I can do a lot of what I do remotely. But
Mhm.
let's say you're a designer, obviously that's really hard. You have to like actually touch and feel the garment.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, COVID brought on a lot of challenges that were completely out of our control. So, for example, shipments were delayed constantly because factories were shutting down, and you know
Right.
there were COVID breakouts everywhere. And obviously, we work across seas. A lot of our factories are, you know, in Asia. And so, you know, that was something that I feel like, you know, is sort of our responsibility as merchants and just product owners, right, of the business. It's like, oh, we need to sell something. Like, what do we do if everything's late? So, you know, it's being uh, having a good enough team and a good enough relationship with your team to be able to just say, all right, everyone, let's drop what we're doing. We need to pivot. We need to figure out what we can do to
Oh
make
my
sure that like
gosh,
we have
that's
something that we
crazy.
can deliver to our customers.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, so that may mean like literally dropping what you're doing and like reworking, you know, existing assortment, working with anyone on the factory side if they're working to say like, hey, is there anything that you guys can ship out? Like, what is that?
Mm.
Let's get ahead of it, and then maybe take the pieces that you can ship out and see if you can make a collection or a capsule out of that. Or is there anything that we can change, you know, from vessel to air and get here sooner?
Oh my gosh, that's
There's
crazy.
so many things that you can think about, but then there are other things you have to consider too. Is like, well, it costs more to air goods in. So do we have the budget for that? You know, and if we don't, you know, what are the pros and cons? Where can we maybe substitute some of our budget and make this work? Is it that important? Maybe we don't. But yeah, so like COVID definitely threw us for a loop. And I would say like even still now, like I think I just heard that like China has another outbreak, and
Yeah,
so
and they're
now
closing all kinds of stuff down.
now we're worried because our factories might be impacted. And just when we thought we were like getting through everything,
Oh
we're now
man.
having to deal with more delays. And it's just, yeah, I mean, that stuff is always gonna, I mean, not that stuff, hopefully not, but like changes are always gonna come at
Yeah.
you, and these challenges that are completely out of your control are always gonna happen, COVID related or not. And I think it's always just like making sure that like you have a strong enough foundation with your team and your organization to be able to just drop everything, like immediately and pivot, figure out a solution, and then jump back into whatever it is that you had to drop. But
Yeah.
yeah, COVID was hard.
For sure. I don't know why I didn't even think of that. That's crazy. So many places were affected, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine having to like take what you have and just making it work in order for your business to survive, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
So I think it's like you have to learn how to not panic, even though it's
mm.
very panicky. Like in the moment, you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? It always instantly feels like, oh, what, like there's no solution. Like, what do we do without products? But, I think if you learn how to sort of balance those emotions and just like, just calm yourself down for a second, you can think of a lot of solutions. Like problem solving, I would say, is like another really great skill to sort of like refine
Mhm,
and
mhm.
develop in your career. Again, not even just within fashion, it's just think anywhere, because like, things are always going to happen, and how you react to in those situations is really important. I think the more frantic you are, the more, nervous or anxiety that you have at that moment, I think you're just not thinking with a clear head. So just learning how to balance those emotions and then continue forward is cool.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering,
Yes.
sorry, my brain just blinked out for a second. But I feel like you kind of shared some of like the things that maybe are not your favorite part of the job, but you kind of get through it, like the people stuff. But
Yeah.
like, what do you love about your job?
Okay, so this is what I was kind of hinting at earlier, is my least favorite part of the job is actually my favorite part of the job.
Oh, okay.
It's the people.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of like stress the importance of like having the soft skills and like the people
Mm.
skills, because I think had I not been in tune with, who I am as a person, in tune with who I'm surrounding myself with, in tune with the culture and environment that I'm signing myself up for when I'm taking a job,
Mhm, mhm,
I think that it probably the people would have just stayed on my one of my least favorite things about my
mhm.
my job. But it is one of my favorite things and favorite aspects of just working in general, is just being able to work and collaborate with so many different people, even the challenging ones. Like I have to say that, my most challenging relationships in the office have also been my best,
Mm.
because it really taught me, just how things that I can do differently. It really taught me to like challenge myself a little bit more, and like being uncomfortable, and pushing myself outside of my comfort zone a little bit, just in order to have conversations that needed to happen. And I also learned how to have them too.
Yeah.
And so, I just, the reason why I take jobs, can answer your other questions from earlier too, is like one of the reasons why I left a company to go to another one was because people that I either interviewed with, or the company culture, or whatever it was, but something about that energy and the environment of that organization sold me on moving there. It's not necessarily even like the company or the product or whatever, because for me, what I value most is just working with people that I trust, people that have just like good energy, people I know I can learn from, that can challenge me, but people I know that I can also challenge too. Like,
Mm.
and I just feel like in order for me to continue to grow and develop in my career, like I want to be surrounded by people who really support that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I feel very lucky to say that I've really enjoyed working with almost every single person I've ever worked with. And I think that's also just, you know, a nod to like how I've approached interview processes.
Mm.
In my each of my career shifts, it's like I've focused more and more on making sure I'm interviewing them too, and like asking them questions that will shed a little bit of more light on onto who they are as an individual, what kind of manager they are, what the company culture is like, and stuff like that, and less about like, I don't know, things that are like unrelated. I can't even think of anything, but like that's what is important to me. And I I am truly like happy to go into work every single day, and it's because of the people. It's not like the job that I'm doing per se. I love what I'm doing, and I like it enough to like continue to do it. But the people, they're the ones that really make it. I mean, I see them more than I see my husband, so
Yeah,
I need to
no,
make sure
yeah.
I really align with them and I really like them.
Oh man, I really love that because I feel like sometimes when someone is can be really driven, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
kind of forget what's important. And at the end of the day, like the people you work with is what I think brings value, right, to the job
Mm-hmm.
itself. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't really get to meet the people that buy the product, right? But it's the people that you work with and or do you? Do
Yeah.
you meet people that buy the product?
Yeah, so actually we sometimes we do. I think that's again like part of why I like being at a smaller company is I do
Uh-huh.
get to be a little bit more involved in that kind of stuff. So like if we have events, I my team we love to go because we want to be able to actually meet them, talk to them about like why do they like us or what do they not like about us?
Hmm.
Um, what do they want to see from us? And it just like again it adds to sort of like the culture of the brand and the business,
Yeah.
and it's just really cool to like hear firsthand from people like why do they even bother buying from us, like what sets us apart from everyone else, because sometimes like it's hard to identify that, and I think why not go directly to the source. It also just like builds a really great relationship with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
customer too, and the brand, and it just sort of like really solidifies, like that bond that we can have, even though like we don't know them, and they're just here at this event, or we just met them randomly because we saw that they had a Legends logo on their hoodie or their
Yeah.
pant or whatever. But again, that just sort of like speaks back to just like the people and the culture, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah, I love that. I love it so much. I mean, it's interesting that your one of your least favorite things though is one of your most favorite things about doing the job.
I
Uh,
guess like I just always found like interacting with people like really interesting. So it kind of makes sense in my head that it's like the my least favorite and my most favorite
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I would say okay, maybe it's my least favorite thing. It's just the most challenging part of my
Challenging.
job.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay, well, again, I feel like I could talk to you the whole night. But I'll wrap it up a little bit. I usually ask all my guests before we end, do you have advice? And you've given a lot of really sound advice. I hope you guys were listening. But is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel like you want to share with someone that maybe is looking to go into the industry or just any life advice at all?
Um, aside from the things I've already mentioned, I know it sounds really scary, but if there's something that you want to do, I feel like you should just go for it.
Mm,
Whether you're in one industry and want to switch industries,
yes.
or I don't know, you've always just thought that something was just such a stretch goal of yours that you didn't think you could reach it or achieve it. And I just feel like, we often don't give ourselves enough credit,
Mm,
and almost like we're our own like enemies sometimes. But I feel like, you really have to believe in like passion is everything. And so I feel like if there's something that you really want to go after, you should just go for it. And again, like networking, meeting the right people, is definitely going to help in that. Just talking to people in the industry or that do what it is that you want to do, just getting to know what it would be like day in the life, and really getting an understanding of like, okay, yeah, this just confirms my feeling. This is what I want to do. Like I say, just like go for it. It's really, really common these days, I think, for people to change industries and change jobs and career paths. I've certainly like thought about it for myself too, like, oh, like what if fashion isn't everything for me forever? Like, what would that next thing be? And it's scary to think about like making that big of a jump, especially since I've been in the industry for so long. But at the same time too, like think about what you do know. Like at the root of it, my job right now is business fashion. Like I have to understand business, but I know fashion too. And that's what makes me good at what I'm doing. So I can be a businesswoman. Like I have the tools. I maybe need to study a little bit more. But you know, just having that confidence and like really looking within all the skill sets that you have, or like totally random, like I have soft people skills, right? Like I know I have those people skills. I may want to go into HR one day, like, you know, joining like a people team at a corporate environment. And why wouldn't I? Like, just because I don't have the experience doesn't mean that I can't. Sure, it might look a little different from everyone else's career path, but you know, I think that I also have the skills that I can speak to, and I can give examples in my current like work that can showcase that too. So, you know, there's just different ways that you can think about it. And I think that if there is something that you're just super passionate about, like go for it. You make it happen and think about everything that you already have learned and have within yourself, and, you know, apply it.
So I think I needed to hear that advice just now.
Were you asking for that, or were you asking for you?
Is she talking to me? Probably, yeah. I'm like, yes, just go for it. Yeah, that's really good. Thanks so much, Justine. I think
of course.
A lot of us needed to hear that for sure. And again, I'm like, okay, don't be afraid. Just do it.
Just do it. I mean, what do you have to lose? Like if you want to leave because you're unhappy, then you have nothing but your unhappiness to lose. I mean, what's the...
So good. That is so good.
Like, what's the word? Like, I don't know. I really don't see a downside. At least you went and tried, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And I'm sure there are people right now that's like easier said than done, Justine. But
yeah, of course.
No, I totally hear you, because it's like, yeah, what do you have to lose other than the fact that maybe you'll be happy if you change? So that's awesome. Justine, would you be open, if there's anybody that's listening that's like, oh, I wish I could just get a little more advice from her, would you be open to me connecting you with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I can send you either my email or something, but yeah, definitely happy to connect. And, you know, I like doing this kind of stuff because I feel like, again, when I was figuring things out, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I kind of just picked this on a whim, and thankfully it worked out. But, you know, anything I can do to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Good seeing you.
Yeah, you too. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Thanks again, Justine. If you have any questions, or you want to just reach out and want to connect with Justine, feel free to DM me on social media, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. Thanks guys. Until next time. Bye.